Well, good morning, everybody. On this Friday forecast video, here's where I want to take you, all right? We're going to start off with just a quick look at the polar vortex. I want to talk about what I think may need to happen to get this December to really just evolve into something pretty substantially cold, but I want to see the impact of that very specifically on the pressure patterns over the Hudson Bay to Greenland. So that's going to be a focus at the beginning. And then as we get farther into this, I'm going to start about halfway through my slides today, getting into the long range. We have new CPC updates. They're very La Niña-ish, but I have big questions about the longevity of this La Niña, which we've been talking about for a while. So I think we should dig into that. And I'm going to pull out an analog here, thanks to one of our viewers who's down in Oklahoma, who just asked me to look into one specific year. So I think it's a good idea to do that. So here's the polar vortex. It's a mess right now. Big stratospheric warming event happening here. It's displaced the polar vortex all the way over to Scandinavia and Russia, and it's quite elongated. And we're curious how much of the winter the polar vortex is going to spend in this fashion. Now, right now, today, there isn't a strong linkage between what's going on here and the troposphere. What I mean by that is this is deep. This is way up in the stratosphere. This is above where aircraft fly, and I mean way above that. The pressure is 10 millibars, so we're very high up in the atmosphere here. But the question is, are we going to get that? And I'm specifically interested, again, in the Hudson Trough versus some sort of Western North American ridge that could get toward Alaska or the Aleutian Islands, the position of which is going to be critical if these two things link up. Because right now, if we just come back down to the mid-levels of the atmosphere, this is what we're dealing with. And I'm watching a few things here. We do have a wave that just left yesterday. This is the one that came through parts of Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico. We saw some severe weather out of this, saw some very heavy rainfall. That wave is already being absorbed into the main flow. So you almost notice it's gone there. But there's another cutoff that's following this, and that's been the story all week. I want to keep an eye on this combination of waves here. This could be the setup for that pre-Thanksgiving system that comes through. And honestly, the big story is, how does it all evolve as we get past Thanksgiving and start to get that deep low setting up over the Hudson Bay? So there we go. So here's just a quick look at precipitation over the last, about 10, 12 hours here. Our next cutoff low coming through, the one that just left. Again, a lot of severe weather, very strong storms. You probably saw the beautiful image of the shelf cloud over Phoenix, but just take a look at this. You notice how sharp that northern edge is. We talked quite a bit about that, but I'm going to show you again in a few minutes why we're not going to be able to push much of this moisture from these next couple of systems north. Let's just call it about I-80 right in through here. But as the rainfall did come through, let's take a look at the southwest first over the last 3 days. And again, we've added quite a bit more precipitation into Southern California, then very heavy rainfall and some mountain snows here into parts of Arizona. Again, Matt kind of hammered on this yesterday, looking at how dry than now how very wet things are. Non-monsoonal, but coming in very, very late. And then as we slide over into the southwestern United States, or south central United States, what is most frustrating is that sometimes when we look at these weather forecast models and they predict precipitation, they seem to spread it out, wash it out, and just kind of give you nice general smooth maps. And then the reality is the storm systems come through and places are missed. In fact, the gentleman I'm talking about, his name is Dallas, that gave me this idea to look into one specific analog year. He's in this spot that got missed, while we saw some places like around Dallas, Fort Worth, pick up 4 inches of rain or more. And you can even see some really, really good rains that got into parts of Missouri, Arkansas, and even up into Kansas. Now, we're not done. We still have better chances of this coming back into this area. But I do want to point out that the newest drought monitor that was updated, just take a look at how that region that we're seeing this moisture come through had over the last month a 1 to 2 class degradation in drought. We saw that also in the upper Midwest, the Golden Triangle of Montana, and pockets of the Southeast as well. So our drought monitor still, right now is quite aggressive on aerial coverage, about 70%-ish, 65 to 70% coverage across the lower 48 in some form of drought. And I want to show you why, you see these degradations, because since the start of the month up until the 19th, okay, so this is the start of the month to the 19th, look at all the climate reporting districts down here that were in that darkest shade, representing the driest start to a November on our records, which go back to 1893. Meanwhile, the multiple cutoff lows that have come through California, getting into this part of Arizona, just keeping it extremely wet, which is not very La Nina in its kind of characteristics, right? We tend to see much wetter conditions in the northwest, which is why you see Central Oregon, the Snake River Valley, parts of Montana drier in November. That's a bit more rare. Now, since the rains came through, just watch the statistics down here because this is where we brought some of that rain through. I'm going to add that in, and now you can see we peeled them off a little bit, but we're still looking at a top 10, even with this moisture that came through, a top 10 to top 15 driest starts to November. We still have more time to go, and there is more rain, but I think it's important to kind of point these things out, knowing that we're watching these drought areas very, very carefully right now. Okay, going forward, Storm Prediction Center is keeping an eye out just on this side of the Mississippi River. Then you're going to watch in the day on Saturday, just chances for storms along the southern tier. And as the next wave comes out, Texas on Sunday, we do need to be just aware of that risk coming into this region once again. Take note, well, here's your risk of excessive rainfall today. This is what we think it's going to be on Sunday. So Dallas, if you're listening, Dallas, my friend, not the people in the city, but we do have, again, chances of precipitation coming through. So this is what I'm talking about. It's one of my favorite products, the WPC 7-day rainfall. I show it to you all the time. But I just want to take note that sometimes when these forecasts are generated, the ability to pinpoint those thunderstorms, we just can't do it. So that's why you see these broader areas of wetter conditions that show up in the models rather than just an accurate pinpointing down of where it's supposed to be wet versus dry. Now, I can tell you with a lot of confidence there is going to be a large section of the country here that's drier. You can see much of the southeast through Florida is expected to be drier out of this pattern as well. And there's a lot of good evidence for that. And I've got big questions I'm going to be raising about the West Coast and the risk throughout the rest of December as to going over drier as well. And you know what that's going to come down to? A discussion about where the big Pacific Ridge is going to be. And if you just look at it, over the next week or so, this gets us out past Thanksgiving, the best probabilities for getting over an inch of precipitation are highlighted in this map. Okay? Now, when we get beyond this, as Matt stressed yesterday, could we be seeing a much more active track through here, through there, and coming into the northeast? There seems to be some mounting evidence as a deeper trough of low pressure anchors itself. Now I'm talking in December over much of the Hudson Bay. This is where all that cold air is going to be. That I should be watching out for storm systems that do this, okay? And the problem is that's going to leave a lot of the West Coast over very, very dry. Now, while I'm on the map, I do want to flip this down to show you who's got the best chances over the next week of staying dry. And again, look at that hard line right in through there, along or south of I-80. And then, come back into the Western Plains, we're drier. The Northern Plains, the Canadian Prairies, drier. Although we are watching a little bit of snow coming through here. Models have backed off a little bit on that total, but there is some snow coming in. But again, that's just your next week. So we need to get in and kind of discuss and talk about why this is the way it is and why it has the shape it has. And again, I'm going to focus a lot on the West Coast in a few moments here. But right now, I was just looking right there on that corridor. I keep highlighting that I-80 corridor at the moisture levels. And you can see when you kind of get a picture of the flow, there's your ridge. And the flow's coming around like this. It's almost deforming right in through this area. Can you see that? And as a result, we're just pinching right in through here, this boundary where there's much more humid air to the south, much drier air to the north. And you can even see it if you look at the dew point temperatures. We go from some places down here, Kentucky, Tennessee, where the dew points, as we get into Saturday morning, as an example, are 50s and 60s to 30s and 20s above that. Remember, dew point's a measure of absolute moisture in the atmosphere. So given all of that, you're going to start to see that hard northern boundary when you compare the GFS to the European model for this system in particular. But you can take note of the next low coming through California here as we watch these both move across the country. This is through tonight, getting out into Saturday morning, exits through the mid-Atlantic, the first system. The second wave on Saturday night into Sunday morning moves through Arizona, possibly some very good snows for the southern Rockies. We need this. We got to build this snowpack at some point. We need to get some of that in there. Snow moving out of Ontario into parts of Quebec and even into parts of upstate New York as an example here in the European model, and a very weak wave hitting the Pacific Northwest. As we go forward, it's that weak wave in the Pacific Northwest that earlier week model runs were putting down here, along what's called the Yellowhead Highway, some very heavy snows. And the models are kind of backed off a bit on this. And once again, it's a situation where earlier forecasts were teaming up two systems, bringing them more into tandem, working together. And now as we get closer, they're more separated. But where you are in time, this is Monday night. Okay, so you can see the heavier rains moving back in through this area, down here in the Ozarks and south. And then that storm system moves through Tuesday into Wednesday. So that is your kind of pre-Thanksgiving storm system. It starts again here on Monday, slides to the east such that by Wednesday morning, which is here, getting into Thursday morning, which is there, we're going to be dealing with just a big shot at colder air, some lake effect snow, and on Thanksgiving, a system that's kind of rolling into the Pacific Northwest. But I'm very curious as to how much longer these systems are going to be able to get into the Pacific Northwest because of an event that's taking shape there that we do need to discuss. Before I get to it, I do want to make a point that some of the forecast models that Matt was talking about yesterday, he's like, don't trust this, just look at it. We need to see what the models are doing. Remember, he was bringing up this possibility of a big nor'easter happening. You can now see that the models have kind of ditched that idea. It just doesn't seem to have enough cold air, and the timing is terrible. Example here, look at the GFS forecast run versus the European. European, way more progressive, tosses the system out. GFS is much later lingering, and as a result, you still see a lot of precipitation in the northeast throughout the middle of the day on Thanksgiving. And then, again, the system that follows it here, this is a wave that's moving through parts of the Midwest, upper Midwest here by Friday, November 28th. Hey, the Europeans like, let's put down some snow for some of that holiday travel. It's nowhere to be found here in the GFS. So it's just an example of some of the chaos in the system and the models when you get out that far. And we just need to stress that so that our forecasts aren't misinterpreted by just hanging on to every single model run and what it can do. You do note this though. You get out there 10 days and both models have got pretty wild pressure patterns. And what I mean by this is there seems to be some sort of big high here or there, depending on which model you're looking at. And every time these high pressure centers move to the east, we just seem to open all the doors open for fun southwest flow. And so we're going to be watching for that very carefully going out there farther into the forecast. Now let me show you what I'm talking about. This is this upcoming Tuesday. Okay, there's the low that comes through. Remember this one deepens over parts of Ontario and Quebec. High pressure comes in behind it. There it is. That's what's bringing in the cold. Now watch. We get out there to Friday. So where's that snow coming from? Well, there's high pressure in here, but there's cold air, and usually right on the southern side of it with a particular setup like this, you can get some snow. So that's why we're thinking about that in that forecast. But it's day 10 that I'm starting to get interested in. And look, November 29th through the 30th and 31st, do you see what I'm seeing? See these colors here representing low pressure? What we're seeing here is we finish out the month of November, get into December. Man, the atmosphere is opening things up to more frequent winter storm type events while anchoring all of its lowest pressure in the atmosphere, kind of Hudson Bay and east. And therefore, there's this thought process. It's even being echoed right now by the CPC. Let's just go to their website real quick. Have you seen kind of their outlook? There it is. Like that's their snowfall outlook for November 20th to December 4th. Temperatures, they've got really cold temperatures sinking down into Texas as an example. They've got a lot of wind with these systems rolling across the country. And precipitation-wise, the lower Mississippi River Valley, they have wetter than average. And we're just keeping an eye on these things as we look out there because the forecast models, look at this, all three of them, and then the CPC's forecast for that November 28th to December 4th or November 29th to December 5th, just very active. But have a look. This is what's starting to get concerning to me. Because if we end up seeing the western United States start to, just go over dry, it's an indicator that high pressure is building off the coast or close to the coast. And I had thought that this was not going to be able to linger nearby and that it was going to be moving more toward the Aleutian Islands. And if that's wrong, then that's really going to change things up. So all of this wet weather we've been seeing along the West Coast, specifically California, is going to be kind of mission critical to this upcoming forecast. But this is what I'm talking about. As you get out there, November 30th, that's the ridge. And if that ridge can back its way up more over this direction, then I'm not worried about the West Coast. We're going to get more troughs coming through. But as we play it forward, it just isn't. See, that's December 3rd. So this suggests dropping, a wave here anchored to a deep, low over the Hudson Bay, a lot of cold air coming through. And then this ridge just parked too close, ruining the flow to much of the western United States. But at the same time this is all occurring, do you see the warmer colors here? We could be in a major contrasting temperature pattern, which results in this jet stream level pattern, which we're observing by looking at what's called the 500 millibar heights, the troughs and ridges. And I'm going to tell you something. If this does in fact take shape, that's where this corridor becomes super active with storm systems. Now, in order for that to occur, we've got to see something shift around in this temperature pattern we've been in since the beginning of November. So ranking temperatures right now, all these places with the number 1, this is the new warmest start to any November on record, which goes back to, again, to 1893. And that's incredible to think about, given that we've had these cutoff lows that have come through. It's still been very, very mild here when you compare it to historical averages. It was only the Northeast really seeing cooler than normal conditions. Well, our frost threat over the next 7 days looks like this. If you've been watching all week, you know that we had seen a lot of mild air here that's now being replaced. When is that being replaced? Well, you can tell by looking at the max temperatures. Here's today's highs, getting into Saturday and Sunday. Very, very mild for this time of year across the northern tier of the United States. Our cutoff low is here early next week. There's Tuesday, the beginning of the first shot at some really cold air coming through. There's Wednesday, following the system that rolls through the Great Lakes, Ontario. And as we get into Friday, that's our high temperatures on Friday, kind of dropping these temperatures down. And if you look at the minimum temperatures, which you can go do on the same link, watch this. Let's get out there to Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So see this? This is some pretty cold air that's dipping south here. Now the temperature matrix has actually been evolving very consistently. So what was earlier in the week only the day 10 to 15 Arctic outbreak, now you see it in the day 5 through 10. And it's consistent among the models, with the most aggressive model continuing to be the AI. So just be aware that if you're looking at individual forecasts, we blend them all, we look at all of them, we compare them all, and the AI is the most aggressive on the depth of the cold. But can I show you the European ensemble? Because this one's got an interesting tail to it. You see, if we end up putting a ridge here and anchor a trough there, the contrast runs right in the middle. And that's why I think we could be looking at this early December. Well, I'll show it to you here. Look at the European model out that far. Can you kind of get yourself oriented here? This is this upcoming Monday. Okay, so let me get you farther out in the forecast. We see systems rolling through. Now watch, there's the high that's going to be out over the open Atlantic. I'm going to keep an eye on the positional strength of this and this. Where are we? This is November 26th, the day before Thanksgiving. There's Thanksgiving. Now watch. As we go forward in this to the 30th, the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, do you start to see a few things changing here? Now we are way out in a single model run. I don't care. I'm showing you what I think could be meteorologically consistent. We see high pressure building back in here, deeper lows coming through the middle. And if I just play this for you again, can you watch this corridor? Watch right into there where I've just drawn those 3 lines. Here we go. See all that activity? And while that all takes place, look at the presence of this high, ruining the flow coming into the northwest. And that's where our concern starts to come in a big way with this. Because that time period of November 28th through the 5th, we see the ridge building into the Gulf of Alaska. See, this is just not the right, well, it is the direction the models are predicting, but not the right setup to just drive systems into the west. We may peel off a cutoff low in this, I don't know. But it's this big, deep Hudson Bay low that I'm watching. So this is now just sliding forward through middle of December. This is now December 16th. And the farther out we go in the forecast, wow, the atmosphere wants to anchor something deep here. So will systems follow this track around that Hudson Bay low is going to be the big question. So let's go just dig, right? Let's go look at temperatures first. How about a 7-day kind of, floating window here? First week of December. Second week of December. Look at this. That's interesting. Let's get into the 3rd week of December. That's the one that finishes on Christmas. That's a lot of Arctic air being pushed into this area. Got to keep an eye on that. Precipitation totals, this is what I'm worried about. This goes out from November 25th to December 25th. And what we're paying attention to is if there's high pressure that moves back into here, do you see how this opens up a corridor of wetter conditions? Then you have systems that meet up with it here. And the question is, do they just barrel their way into the northeast? And is all of this green that you see across the top going to be snow, given how cold it is? Now, my problem with this pattern is the Pacific high seems to want to live there. We've now seen the models trend. I mean, just this week alone, much drier along much of the West Coast in this particular pattern. Now, we've been concerned all winter long that the West Coast is going to have its winter be delivered in kind of fits and starts and comes and goes and comes and goes. But I don't want to slide into a November into December time frame that just gets drier and drier because of a stuck high. Now, why I'm still skeptical is, the ocean temperatures have been cooling right here for a while. That might be enough to work against this, but man, that ridge looks overpowering in the current model forecasts. So that's halfway through my tabs. What the heck is all the rest of this? All of this is going to boil down to a subseasonal discussion. And if you've been watching my videos this week, I've been going back to this graphic every time. It's called a Hofmüller diagram. And here's today the black line. The blues are troughs and the reds are ridges. And it lines up geographically. Look at the bottom of your screen with this region. Now, do you remember what we showed all week long? The model had, again, the 25th through the 9th, it had put a bunch of blue down there. Do you remember that? And I said, look, that's right over this part of North America. Look what it's done now. I'll kind of outline this blue for you. This is just, this is fascinating, this new transition it's made. It's now putting more of that Hudson Bay North Atlantic trough into place. That is a major Atlantic signal. It's going to affect the Arctic Oscillation, the North Atlantic Oscillation, and it could really be something that sets up that track that I kept discussing with you a moment ago. So I'm curious if we're going to get this. Now, the MJO is making a move. The subseasonal forecast is kind of like waffling it around here in 7 and 8, diving it back into null space. The operational run way out into phase 7. Now, this is a common phase when you have a La Niña. And what we get when we have that particular phase as we get into the month of December is, look, you tend to get deep Hudson troughs and a ridge that lives way too close to North America on the western side. You also get a ridge here. So can you see that if we do in fact get this pattern, we will see storm systems that roll around like this and come around like more like that, and they just rip through this particular area the farther we get into the month of December, leaving the west coast in the lurch, keeping the northern tier of the United States and the northeast very cold, the southeast mild. In between you have a void, and I'm worried about how much moisture we can put back into this area, knowing that the rainfall that just came through there hit some areas very hard and missed other areas entirely. But this setup in through here, should it manifest itself, is going to become an interesting key to watch, okay? So, we got this issued yesterday. The Climate Prediction Center's website went down for a few hours in the morning, and then it popped back up with all their new forecast videos, or forecast images, excuse me. And I got to be honest, I looked at this and I go, man, I don't know. And here's what I don't know. I think you should take more of this cold, leave it in Montana, but drive it more into the northeast. I think you should take this mild and expand it. Now, this is just my interpretation. And then prepare for a very sharp gradient right in through there of temperatures. What I am most worried about is this is too wet. I've seen the models overpredict Montana precipitation now for several weeks. And I think we've got this area probably too dry in the forecast. Even they're going, wait, it says wet. I know. I think it's more active than that. What I would be most worried about is expanding the dry risks here, maybe even farther into the plains than what's currently being shown. Now, the National Weather Service, CPC, these are brilliant scientists. These are my friends, colleagues, in fact, former students of mine work here. I'm not questioning their work. I'm adding to it. And that's just my thought process on this. And I kind of want to make a case as to why. I think that the forecasts we're seeing right now are a little too La Niña-ish. And the La Niña, yeah, there it is. You just watched the animation going back from August till now. It's been building and building and building, but I am curious, going back to another Hofmüller diagram, if we're starting to see the end of these. Now, what are these? Well, this is today, the black line. This is going forward. It's another Hofmüller diagram, but we're at 850 millibars. That's a mile above our heads. We're looking at zonal wind anomalies. So blue, the cooler colors, represent easterly wind bursts. And the reds are westerly wind bursts. I think we're going to be getting ourselves into the end of seeing these things happen. And what I mean by that is we've been watching for a long time. Go back to the beginning of November. Look, there's your La Niña. You ever want to know what it is? This is all it is. It's these trade winds coming across like this. But when you look at their anomalies, so in other words, are they stronger or weaker than normal now? The trade winds are present, but compared to normal, look at that. These are not exceptionally strong anymore. And we're going to lose this. That's part of our westerly wind bursts coming out of the Indian Ocean, which we've talked extensively about. That's the Indian Ocean dipole. And you're going, all right, make a point, Eric. My point is, when that happens, the upper atmosphere winds, so now we're way up high in the sky. This is jet stream level. These winds, which come back across, completing the circuit, completing the loop, they're going to start to fade. Now, if you're wondering what I just drew for you, here is NOAA's La Nina diagram, okay? Subsidence here, strong flow in strong trades, rising motion where? Phase 6, phase 5, phase 7, MJO. So I just showed you these winds across the top and these winds across the bottom. Now, these are the winds across the bottom that are weakening. And as soon as they weaken, the MJO is no longer held hostage right there. And it moves. That by the way, if you're watching, this is the MJO. Here it is. That's where it is, okay? La Niñas, El Niños hold it in place. I think it's about to move, is my main point. Because so far, since beginning of September, it's been squarely there while all the sinking motion's been here. Can you see these maps now compared to that vertical diagram? Now, anomalously, very strong phase 4, 5, 6. I think we're about to get some serious movement in that. And that's going to change everything else up once we get through the month of December. So here we go. These ocean temperatures, okay, you look at these regions, Niño 4, Niño 3.4, Niño 3, and Niño 1 plus 2. Where the heck are you in the world? Well, Niño 4 is over here. Niño 3.4 is there. Niño 1 or 3 is here, and 1 plus 2. We're just looking at these different areas, okay, that's all. And you start to see, are they coming down to a peak? I think they are. Last year, they didn't peak until February. See that? But I think this year, we're going to get an earlier peak out of this, meaning that La Nina is probably going to give up soon. Now, that doesn't make me fully call these maps into question, but they get me thinking about it. This is the newest update, just released yesterday, from their model. It's the probability of exceedance. So you're looking at the chances of being warmer or cooler than average. And this is the December, January, February forecast from the CPC. This is the January, February, March forecast from the CPC. And this is the February, March, and April. Now, they've anchored the cold air in the Canadian Prairie and the Northern Plains. I think in December, we should push more of this into this region. That's just my opinion on this. Take it for what it is. On the precipitation side, they have this outlook for December, January, and February, which is La Nina-esque, is about as clear as it could be. But the only thing that's not La Nina-like is that they should, if it was full La Nina, all of this would be drier as well. That's December, January, February. This is January, February, March. And then they've got this for February, March, April. If you notice, they all kind of look the same. Drier, Sunbelt, Cotton Belt, Southeast, very wet, Delta, Ohio Valley, Eastern Great Lakes, as well as parts and pockets of the Pacific Northwest. Now, all of that being said, what are we going to do with it? Well, I'm going to tell you this. You're going to hear a lot of folks this winter. It's just like what we do every summer, right? Every summer, everyone's like, well, let's compare it to 1988 or 2012. And we get into winter, it's like, well, the most recent ridiculously cold winter was 2013-14 for much of the country, except for the Southwest. And this is the map, right? And you're going to hear a lot of folks say, 13-14, that's the year it is. And I'm going to tell you, look, those were the ocean temperatures of November 18th, 2013. That doesn't look anything like what we have right now, does it? In fact, we were dealing with a kind of a mixed INSO-neutral condition. We did not look at the warmth of the water here versus the cold we've now built into that area. We have a really different PDO signature. So when you see these forecasts, I understand there's multiple ways to get cold air, okay? Don't get me wrong. But like this was record cold in some places. I'm just telling you that 13 is not the right analog for this. So what is the right analog? Well, we've tried to put together our own package, but I'm going to come back to Dallas. He brought up an interesting point. Do you know that late November of 2017, we had a building La Nina, cold water in the Gulf of Alaska, warm water in the north. I mean, this is actually a very similar look to this year. There's this year, 17. This year, 17. So Dallas, I told you I'd do this for you. This is what happened in December 2017. Went over mild here, much colder there. I'm talking much colder. I mean, these temperatures are 7 degrees off of average. The precipitation pattern was interesting, though. Unlike what I told you, which is to watch this corridor, 2017 was drier and very dry in the west. Now, that western U.S. dryness signal is showing up, but I don't see this. I think we're going to have much more potential in December 2025 compared to this. And one of the big reasons was in December 2017, there was no big subtropical ridge sitting here. Sorry, that's a messy drawing, but nothing here to pump the moisture. I think we're going to have that this year, okay? But after that, what did the rest of January through March look like? That quarter went extremely wet, which we are seeing in the subseasonal forecast. Remember, let's go back and find one. There it is. See it? And are we wetter here? Well, let's go back and look at that particular. Yeah, we were wetter there. Drier southeast, drier along the west coast, drier in the southern plains. Dallas, I think you're onto something here. I appreciate you bringing this up because I'll be honest, it was an analog year that was in the package, but I hadn't looked at it individually. So I'm going to have to give it a nod, and I just want to say thank you for bringing it to my attention because I think it could be a critical one to be paying attention to here going forward. Oh, and by the way, January through March was a terrible calving season for parts of Montana given how cold it was. We actually saw the extent of that cold get through this whole region. Okay? So, just a thought here. We're going to finish this up quickly with a look at South America. I'm bringing up the European model through the month of December. The GFS agrees that this is wet. The GFS agrees that this is dry. They don't agree right in through here. But the big question is, we've not seen major drought build into this area yet. So there's not a problem here yet. But the question is, are we going to see something like that build in with time? So that'll wrap up a week's worth of forecast videos. We'll be very excited to watch the animations of these models getting through the weekend and kind of see how everything pans out. But that's my thought process as of Friday morning. So take care, everybody. We'll talk about this again next week. Until then, enjoy your weekend and be safe. Thanks.